April 14th, 1912, 1:42 in the afternoon. A captain hands the ship's owner a warning about ice ahead. He folds it into his coat pocket. 2 hours after midnight, that ship is at the bottom of the Atlantic. More than 1,500 people are dead, and 2 separate governments open investigations to find out exactly why. 2 governments investigated this same disaster. They read the same testimony. They still reached different verdicts. Both inquiries are real. Both reports are public record, still readable today. And on at least one point, the 2 governments do not agree with each other. This is not the movie version. This is what the 2 official investigations actually found 114 years ago, and where they still contradict each other. You're watching Black Box Breakdown. Titanic, the verdict 2 governments couldn't agree on. Chapter 1. The ship with more lifeboats than the law required. White Star Line built this ship to answer a rival's speed record, not to break one. Where Cunard's liners were built to be fast, White Star built for size and for comfort. Construction took 26 months at the Harland and Wolff yard in Belfast. 8 of the yard's own workers died building her. A trade journal at the time called the ship's watertight compartment system, quote, practically unsinkable. That is a real, qualified engineering claim. The flat, unqualified word unsinkable came later, mostly from newspapers, after the fact. That popular idea that this ship was marketed to the public as unsinkable is mostly a myth invented after it sank. Here is the real flaw, and it is not the one you think. British lifeboat law scaled the number of boats a ship had to carry to its weight in tons, and that law had not been updated since ships a third this size were the biggest afloat. Under that outdated law, this ship needed 16 lifeboats. It carried 20. It was carrying more boats than the law required, and its boats still had room for barely half the people on board. On the day itself, 7 separate ice warnings reached this ship's radio room. 1 came from the steamer Coronia that morning. 1 came from the Baltic that afternoon, and that is the one the captain personally carried to the ship's owner. 1 more warning came in just before 8 p.m. that night from a ship called the Masaba. It described a solid field of ice and icebergs directly in this ship's path. That message never reached the bridge. It was left behind on a table in the radio room. By 11 that night, the ship was still holding roughly 22 knots, through a night the crew already knew was full of ice. Chapter 2. 7 warnings. 1 never reached the bridge. A few miles away, another ship, the Californian, had already stopped for the night. Surrounded by ice, her captain had gone to sleep in the chart room. At around 11 p.m., the Californian's radio operator tapped out a message to this ship. "We are stopped," he said, and surrounded by ice. This ship's own senior radio operator, buried in passenger telegrams, cut him off. "Shut up," he sent back. "I am busy. I am working Cape Race." Minutes later, the Californian's operator switched his radio off for the night and went to bed. At 11:40 p.m., high in the crow's nest, a lookout named Frederick Fleet saw something directly ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. Chapter 3. 11:40 p.m. The night the ship had left itself no margin. There is no photograph of what happened in the next few seconds. No camera was there. This is a reconstruction, built only from the testimony of the men who lived through it. The iceberg did not smash through the hull in one blow. It scraped along the side, below the waterline, popping rivets and buckling steel plates across several compartments at once. That was the one failure this ship's design could not survive. It was built to stay afloat with any 4 of its watertight compartments flooded. That night, water was pouring into 6 of them at once. Captain Stanley Lord, on the Californian, was woken twice that night about strange lights and rockets in the distance. Asked later what colour they were, he testified, quote, "I do not know. I was asleep." On board, the ship had lifeboat capacity for a little over half the people it carried that night. Some boats were lowered only partly full. By 2:20 in the morning, the ship was gone. Survival split sharply by class. Roughly 97% of first-class women survived. Roughly a quarter of third-class passengers of either sex did. Before dawn, a Cunard liner called the Carpathia reached the lifeboats and picked up just over 700 survivors. This is that actual ship, real footage, filmed steaming toward them that same night. Neither official inquiry ever formally investigated why the survival gap by class was so wide. The disparity is documented. Its exact cause, to this day, was never formally settled by either government. Casualty counts still differ by source, from around 1,490 to 1,517. Even the death toll, both governments could not fully agree on. Days later, a real recovery ship, the Mackay Bennett, left Halifax and searched the water where the wreckage had drifted for the dead the lifeboats never reached. Chapter 4. Two governments, two verdicts. Within days, the United States Senate opened its own inquiry. Weeks later, so did the British government in what's known as the Wreck Commissioner's Inquiry. Both are real documents. Both still exist. This is the British report. Its actual verdict on the ship's captain was not guilty of negligence because he was simply following the accepted practice of the time, but the inquiry condemned that practice itself. The American inquiry reached a harsher verdict on the same captain. His own indifference to danger, the Senate report concluded, was one of the direct causes of what it called an unnecessary tragedy. Two governments studied the same man on the same night and reached two different verdicts. Then there is the Californian. The British report's real finding was specific. That ship, it concluded, could have pushed through the ice to open water and might have saved many, if not all, of the lives that were lost. The American inquiry went further, recommending, quote, drastic action against that ship's captain. That captain spent the rest of his life disputing it. He died in 1962, still fighting to clear his name. Two separate petitions to reopen the case in 1965 and 1968 were both rejected. Researchers still argue about it today. Some maintain a third, unidentified ship was sitting between the two vessels that night, and that the Californian was never as close as either inquiry concluded. That theory is disputed, not settled, and it belongs to the people who argue it, not to this report. The ship's owner faced his own verdict in the newspapers rather than either report. He survived by boarding a lifeboat, and the press spent years calling him a coward for it. His own testimony says he helped load others nearby first. Neither official government report ever called him a coward. That verdict belonged to the newspapers, not to either investigation. Chapter 5. What changed because of this ship? Both reports agreed on enough to force real change. Within 2 years, 13 nations signed the first international treaty on safety at sea. Every ship, from then on, had to carry enough lifeboats for every person aboard, regardless of its tonnage. Every ship had to keep its radio staffed around the clock, and a new ice patrol was created to track icebergs in the shipping lanes permanently. The wireless operator who cut off that final warning died in the sinking. The one who sent it survived, avoided the spotlight for the rest of his life, and died quietly in 1956. The ship's owner lived another 25 years, largely out of public life. The Californian's captain spent his final years still fighting the finding against him. The wreck itself was not found for another 73 years, until 1985, during what was, at the time, a secret American Navy mission. A submersible dove to that same wreck in 2023 and never came back. This channel has already told that story in full. A famous film, decades later, gave the world its picture of this night. Its own director has said he made it as accurate as he could at the time. But even that film never puts the two governments' real, conflicting verdicts on screen. 114 years later, both reports are still public record. Both are still available to read. And on the question of who could have been saved, they still do not agree. What stays with me here isn't the iceberg. It's that a ship carrying more lifeboats than the law demanded still didn't have enough of them. And that two governments investigated the same night, read the same testimony, and still walked away with different answers. 114 years is a long time for a verdict to still be disputed. This one still is. If two governments quietly disagreeing on the same disaster got you, wait until you see how the official Chernobyl report reversed its own verdict 6 years after the fact. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.